Did you know that 60% of black travelers report experiencing discrimination abroad? It's a harsh reality, but one that can't be ignored. As a black traveler, is your dream destination really as welcoming as it seems? Today, we're diving deep into the top 10 countries where black travelers may face unexpected challenges. Travel is often seen as a way to escape, to explore, and to immerse yourself in new cultures. But for black travelers, the journey isn't always smooth. Unfortunately, racism, discrimination, and even safety risks are still a part of the global travel experience. Black travelers often find themselves facing subtle biases, such as being stared at, to more overt forms of hostility, like being refused service or worse. This isn't just anecdotal. Travel advisories for black people exist for several countries, highlighting the importance of doing your research before you go. 1. Saudi Arabia. While Saudi Arabia attracts millions of tourists and workers from across the globe, black visitors, especially those of African descent, often face unique challenges. Many black migrant workers have reported cases of racial discrimination, poor working conditions, and even exploitation. Travelers might not face the same extreme conditions, but black tourists have spoken about encountering dismissive attitudes in restaurants, markets, and public spaces. Example: in 2013, reports of abuse toward African migrant workers, particularly Ethiopians, gained international attention. While tourists are treated more kindly, the general atmosphere can still feel racially charged, especially in less international areas. 2. Japan. Japan is a country deeply rooted in homogeneity. With a relatively small population of black residents, the sight of black tourists can be a novelty to many Japanese citizens. While overt racism is rare, subtle forms of discrimination such as prolonged staring, avoidance, or even rude behavior in public transport have been noted by black travelers. Japan's beauty can be overwhelming, but its lack of diversity sometimes results in awkward or uncomfortable encounters. Example: in 2020, a controversy arose when a Japanese TV show featured a comedian in blackface, sparking outrage among black communities. Such incidents reflect a lack of understanding about racial sensitivities and contribute to the uncomfortable atmosphere some black tourists feel in Japan. 3. India. India's long-standing issues with colorism, a form of discrimination based on skin tone, make it particularly challenging for black travelers. Black Africans, especially students, have reported severe discrimination in housing, social interactions, and even violent attacks. While not every part of India is hostile, incidents of overt racism have occurred in major cities, leading to a complex travel experience for black visitors. Example: in 2017, a Nigerian student was attacked by a mob in Noida, a city near New Delhi, in an incident that sparked international headlines. While such violent acts are rare, many black travelers report experiencing uncomfortable stares, rude remarks, and a lack of service in some establishments. 4. South Korea. South Korea, like Japan, has a relatively homogeneous population, and media portrayals of black people often reinforce negative stereotypes. Black travelers report being stared at and sometimes treated with suspicion, especially outside major cities like Seoul. Although racism isn't often aggressive, the lack of exposure to diversity means black travelers may face challenges in day-to-day interactions. Example: a black American teacher in South Korea detailed an incident in which she was denied service at a restaurant in Seoul, with the staff refusing to explain why. While these cases are not the norm, they highlight how black people can sometimes feel unwelcome. 5. Israel. Israel's complex social fabric includes tensions with African migrants and asylum seekers, which can spill over to affect how black tourists are treated. Although the country is welcoming to tourists overall, black travelers sometimes report being treated with suspicion, particularly at borders or in security checks. Example: in recent years, there has been growing hostility towards African asylum seekers, particularly those from Sudan and Eritrea. While this specifically affects migrant populations, it has contributed to a general atmosphere of racial tension that black tourists may sense. 6. Ukraine has been notorious for its intolerance toward racial diversity, especially toward black residents and students. Many black travelers recount experiencing outright hostility, including being followed, refused service, or even harassed in public. The country's lack of racial diversity, coupled with rising nationalism, can make it a daunting destination for black travelers. Example: in 2019, a black student was harassed and assaulted on public transport in Kyiv, sparking conversations about the racism African students face in Ukraine. Such incidents, while not the norm, highlight how overt racism can affect black visitors as well. 7. Greece. Greece's recent history with African migrants, particularly those fleeing conflict zones, has fueled racial tensions. While tourist hubs like Athens and Santorini are generally safe for all travelers, venturing outside these areas can be more problematic for black visitors. Discrimination can take the form of cold stares or more aggressive behavior, particularly in rural areas. Example: in 2018, reports emerged of African migrants being attacked by far-right groups, especially in cities like Thessaloniki. Though these incidents primarily target migrants, black tourists may still experience a heightened sense of discomfort due to the broader racial tensions. 8. Italy. Italy has experienced a rise in racially motivated attacks, often fueled by nationalist groups. Black travelers, particularly those of African descent, can face hostile attitudes, especially in southern Italy and smaller towns. While major cities like Rome and Milan are generally more cosmopolitan, black travelers may still face microaggressions or uncomfortable situations. Example: in 2019, an African immigrant was murdered in broad daylight in Calabria by a far-right extremist. Though this is an extreme case, black travelers have reported being verbally harassed or refused entry into certain venues, especially in rural areas. 9. China. China's unfamiliarity with black culture, combined with negative stereotypes perpetuated by media, can make it an uncomfortable place for black travelers. Many report being stared at, photographed without consent, or even refused service in some establishments. While racism in China is often unintentional and based on ignorance, it can still be jarring for black visitors. Example: during the COVID-19 pandemic, several African nationals in Guangzhou were evicted from their homes and hotels, accused of spreading the virus despite no evidence. This sparked an international outcry and underscored the deeply ingrained biases against black people in China. 10. Russia. Russia is perhaps one of the most dangerous destinations for black travelers, particularly due to the presence of far-right nationalist groups. While tourists in Moscow and St. Petersburg may fare better, venturing outside the major cities increases the risk of harassment and even physical violence. Black visitors often report being the targets of racial slurs and aggression. Example: a Ghanaian student was beaten in Moscow in 2020, an incident that garnered attention due to the racially motivated nature of the attack. These attacks are not uncommon, with many black travelers feeling unsafe even in crowded areas. I'll never forget reading the story of a young black traveler in Russia. She was harassed on the streets of Moscow and felt unsafe the entire trip. Her experience is not unique. Many black travelers recount similar stories of feeling out of place, targeted, or even in danger while simply trying to explore the world. It's a stark reminder that for some of us, travel isn't just about discovering new places. It's about survival. As you can see, these countries offer incredible experiences, but also pose significant challenges for black travelers. Awareness is key. Knowing the risks and understanding the cultural climate in these destinations can help you make informed decisions. Remember, travel